All right, good morning, everyone. I am recording. Today is Wednesday, July 12th, 2023, day 31 of our summer 2023 Rankin Technical College online C# programming class, AWD 1100. All right. Now, as it says, today, the first thing I'm going to do is go over with you the chapters 14 through 16 pretest. I've sent you the user interface, and I also sent you a copy of the validator.cs file. Now, I'm going to go and do everything. And I was thinking about this a little bit earlier this morning that, you know, I teach classes online here. And in the first year of the program, in the seeded thing in at the St. Louis campus, Doug Gegelman teaches those courses. I don't know him other than through meetings and et cetera. I've been with him. He seems like a very nice, very competent person. In the second year, um, the department chair, Mr. Gudmested, Evan Gudmested, teaches the classes. And, maybe you'll be fortunate enough to take a class with Evan. All right. Okay. So as it says, I'm going to go over the pretest. And after that test is over, I'm also going to go over at least chapter 17, probably just chapter 17. Even though we're not going to go into this until next week, it's a short chapter. I think we'll have time to do that. Tomorrow, as it says right here, tomorrow will be a lab period. There'll be no taping tomorrow, email that you get from me tomorrow, but I will be online for the entire period. So if you have questions, you can email me at jpscott@rankin.edu. All right. Next Monday, the 17th, I believe that is, we will be taking the chapters 14 through 16 hands-on test, Hot 6. So as always, the test will be emailed to you by 7 a.m. I will go over the test between 8 a.m. and about 8:15 or so. You'll have the rest of the day to take it, and you'll have to turn it in by midnight. All right. Finally, as it says here, your chapters 12, 14, and 16 written tests and extra exercises. I'm not assigning anything from the labs or those projects. They are due by midnight this Sunday, July 16th. All right. So let's take a couple minutes here. I'm going to close that. And let's just take a couple minutes and actually take a look at the pretest itself. Okay. Now it says add validator.cs. We'll do that, but you're going to have 3 of your own classes in here. And to be honest with you, they're pretty simple. All right. There'll be an employee class, and that employee class, I should have really done this. I guess I did it over here. So let me grab all of these, copy it to the clipboard, and bring that in here like that. Okay. So when you take a look at what is in here, all right, and I think by now, or at least my hope is, this all makes sense to everybody. We've got an employee class. Now you can actually put this on. The employee class is a child of the object class. I've never seen a person who puts that onto their actual code because it's implied. All right, so I'm just going to take it off there, but you can put it on. All right, the employee class will have 3 fields. So all employees, regardless of type, will have a first name, which is a string, a last name, which is a string, and an employee number, which is an int. Now, normally I would have made the employee number a string as well, but I just wanted you to have practice also working with integers. All right. In addition, there will be a display text method that will return a string. It's kind of like the toString method, but it's going to be set up as virtual so that it can be overridden by the our employee class, worker employee class. All right. So speaking of which, an hourly employee inherits from employee. So every hour employee automatically has access to a first name, last name, employee number, and a display text. In addition, the hourly employee will have an hours worked and will have an hourly rate. You've seen this kind of thing before. All right. And again, in addition, the hourly employee will override the display text method that is going to be set in our employee class. Finally, we've got a piece worker class, so to say piece worker employee class, which again will inherit from employee. So again, they will have a first name, a last name, an employee number. All right. In addition, a number of pieces that they create per hour, let's say, and the price they get for each piece. And like the hourly employee class, the piece worker employee class will also override the display text method. All right. So it says create the classes shown above in a class library. So we're going to have 4 classes in our class library that I'm just going to call employee library. We're going to have the validator class. We're going to have the employee class. We're going to have the hourly employee class. And we're going to have the piece worker employee class. All right. Then we will attempt to go in and write a modularized program that lets a user instantiate one or more hourly employees, one or more piece worker employee objects. All right. Now, with all of that said, all right, with all of that said, again, just so you're aware of this, all right, there is no list in here. I did not make a list component or an array component. We're just making some of this stuff up. All right. I think if you go through and you look at the programs that we did in class, all right, the programs that we did in class over the last 2 days, so really Monday, and I went over it again yesterday, those being the letter and the certified letter, and then that photo class. Those collectively, plus this one right here, I think are more difficult than the one problem you're going to get on your test that you're going to take next Monday. So I think that looking over this stuff is a great way for you to study for that test. Okay. Now we're supposed to also include the following constants, and then there's a global variable which didn't fit on the page. But notice employee numbers have to be between 1,000 and 99.99. Again, these are all arbitrary values that I just chose. All right. So employee number minimum, 1,000, employee number maximum, 99.99. The minimum number of hours an employee can work are 84. I'm sorry, the minimum are 0. And we'll make that make this one a little m because I mean the other one's a little m. It doesn't matter if you use a big M, capital M or lowercase. So the fewest hours an employee can work are 0. The most hours an employee can work are 84. The fewest or the smallest hourly rate for an employee is nothing. So again, maybe they're a volunteer or something. And the most an employee can make per hour is 99.99. The most hours an employee can work without getting overtime are 40. The overtime rate is 1.5 or time and a half. All right. The minimum number of pieces an employee can make in an hour is 0. The maximum they can make, the maximum they can make is 100. And the minimum price they can make per piece, although it really doesn't make a lot of sense, is 0. And the maximum, is $1. Again, as I've already mentioned, these are all arbitrary values. All right. It's not like they really mean a whole heck of a lot. All right. I mean, in the context of the program, they do, but they're just values that I picked. Finally, there will be one global variable called gross pay, which again is set to 0. Then I gave you 9 pages that showed quote bad and quote good program runs. So you'll notice in here, I didn't check either one of the, I didn't check either one in here of the radio buttons. So it came back and it said no employee type. You must choose an employee type. Okay. Then we have an hourly chosen, okay? And you may or may not be able to notice this, but we're going to do something similar to what we did with that photo program. So if you choose hourly employee right here, this is going to say hours worked and this is going to say hourly rate. All right. But in this case, we didn't put in a first name or a last name. So it says first name is a required field, last name is a required field. So it's going to use that validator class and the is present in here. All right. Employee number not inputted. So again, no employee number in there. Okay. And you'll notice, or maybe you noticed, here we've got no employee type chosen. But for most of these errors, or many of them, it just says the following errors have been discovered. I just kept it generic. So here, an employee value must be an integer. Here we put an employee number in, but the hours worked was not entered and the hourly rate was not entered. So again, if you choose hourly employee here, if you choose that radio button, this should say hours worked and that'll be hours worked. This will say hourly rate and that'll be hourly rate. If you choose employee or piece worker employee, this is going to say number of pieces made and price per piece. Okay, just so you see what's going on here. All right. So again, in here, we did not enter values. So there's not a valid decimal value in the hours worked or the hourly rate. Here, we did enter values into hours worked and hourly rate, but they were both out of range. Hours we entered were greater than 84. Hourly rate that we entered were greater than 99.99. So it didn't fit within here. I could have entered negative values also. And here I did a similar type of thing where the pieces made, which are supposed to be between 1 or 0 and 100, I guess, okay, we put in something out of range, and the price per piece, which should be between 0 and $1, is also out of range. But again, you'll notice that since I chose piece worker employee here, I get number of pieces made and price per piece. Okay. All right. So here's a valid employee, hourly employee, who doesn't get overtime. So we chose hourly employee. We put something in for a first name and a last name. They're not a union member because the checkbox isn't checked. We did give them an employee number, which was between 1,000 and 99.99. We did give them an hours worked between 0 and 84. We gave them an hourly rate between 0 and 99.99. So we get all that information. Once we press, the next page has got another example, but this person got overtime, just to show you that we did come in here and allow for overtime. So again, hourly employee, this is a union member. So notice this person was not a union member. So it says union status false. The other stuff is pretty much just from here. And then we've got 40 times 20 to give us the 800. Here it's a similar type of thing, but the union status is true. 50 times, I do have $10 or 10 hours worth of overtime. All right. So that's 10 times 20 times 1.5. So they made $800 straight time and $300 overtime for a gross pay of $1,100. All right. Then we've got the same kind of thing for hourly employee. Again, this is all valid information. Now you might look at this and say, wait a minute, 3650 gross pay 720. How the hell did you get that? 36 times 5.50 is 18. 18 times 40 hours gives you 720. They do not get overtime. All right, that's just the way that I set it up. Again, this was all done in a very arbitrary manner. All right. So let's go and bring up, I can save that, sure. And I'm going to bring up the program. There it is. Now I haven't created anything, all right, at all, other than what I sent you, but I want to show you something. You may or may not have noticed if you look at this. You'll notice that I've got two text boxes here that don't have names. And that's text box 5, which is right here, and text box 6, which is right there. The reason they do not have names is they will hold an hours worked and an hourly rate if we chose hourly employee, and they will hold number of pieces made in price per piece. It might be in the other order, I don't remember, for a piece worker employee. So we did not give them names because what that's holding could vary, all right, depending on that stuff. All right, or depending on which of these radio buttons you chose. Okay, so with all that said, let's come in and start working on this. Okay, now there's lots of ways that I can do this, and I know you know that already. I'm just going to do one thing to kind of get us ready before we go in and start, and that is I'm going to go back to here. As I closed it, I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to grab these constants. I'm going to copy them to the clipboard, and I'm going to put them right underneath, and I can put them above or below. In fact, let's put them above our initialized component. So there's all of our constants. Plus, I'm going to come in here and add that one global variable as well. All right. Now, I'm going to save this, so I'll pretty it up later. I'm not that concerned right now, with all this. In fact, I guess I might as well just do it now. Because otherwise I'll say I'll do it later, then I'll forget to do it. All right. So those are all of our global constants and our one global variable. Okay, that's all fine and dandy. So with that part out of the way, let's go in here and let's create our employee library. So I'm going to, again, right mouse click on the solution name. Remember, not the project name, but the solution name. We're making another project. So right mouse click on here, choose add, choose new project, come over to here and find class library. We can call it whatever we want, but I'm going to call it employee library and just run the two words together with a capital E for employee and a capital L for library. And then when I get to next, I want to make sure that this is set to .NET Standard 2.0. All right, and click create. And once I do that, now I have my employee library. I don't need this class1.cs. I could leave that in there and change the name and make that my employee class or whatever. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to delete it. All right. Now, what I'm going to do next, maybe it isn't in the order in which you do it or the way in which you do it, but to me, I'm about trying to do things in what I consider to be the most straightforward manner possible. You may or may not agree with what I just said, and I understand that. But I'm going to come into here, and rather than copy in that validator.cs file, I'm going to go and add, and I'm going to add a class. And I'm going to call it validator.cs. And there it is. I'm going to make it public. All right. I'm going to hit enter right here. And now I'm going to find the file that I sent you this morning, validator.cs. All right. There it is. And I can put the using system in there, but I've already got my namespace. I've already got public class validator. So what I want is everything in between the curly braces. So I want to leave 2 at the end. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to paste it right into here. Now, what I just did may not be the best way of doing it, but it's the way I did it. All right, and I don't think I need any of these. So this is going to be my validator class. All right, this is the same thing that was in the book. So there's my line end. This will check for presence or absence of a variable. This will check if a variable is of type decimal. And what do I need that for? Well, remember that, for example, our hours worked and our hourly rate are both type decimal. On the other hand, our employee number is an integer. So that's what that one is for. And finally, we want to check here to check if a variable is within range. And you already know what those are for. That's min hours, min rate, max rate, etc. All right. So that's everything for my validator class. I could have come in here and right mouse clicked on here, my employee library, and I could have chosen to add existing item and then brought it in, but then I'd have to monkey around by changing the namespace, etc. Doing it the way I did it, I don't have to do that. Again, it's all a matter of what you think is the easiest way of doing things. All right, so let me come in here and do a file, save all, and my hope is I'm not even going to need validator. I'm going to use it, but I'm not going to need to open it up anymore. Okay, so that's the first one. Next, I want to come in here and using my specs as my guide, I'm going to come in here and next, I'm going to make my employee class. So I'm literally going to grab this and I'm going to put that in there as a comment. So I'm going to go back up to my employee library and I'm going to do an add class and I'm going to call it employee.cs. There it is. Again, we're going to make this public. All right. And I'm going to come in here, and even though you don't have to do this, I'm putting all that stuff in there as a comment. So I just want to make sure I'm not going to miss anything. Okay. So again, this is my class. It'll have a first name. It'll have a last name. It'll have an employee number, and it will have a display text method that we're setting up as virtual so that it can be overridden. All right. So technically, we need this line here. We already know it's the employee class. All right. So again, our employee class is going to hold that information. So let's put it in. All right. It's going to have a full arg constructor. Now, you know this, that I'm going to get errors in here. So if I come in and put in public keys, put in public employee, and I come in here and say string, first name, string, last name, int, emp num. All right. Now, if I come in here and try to say, first name equal first name, I'm going to get errors because we haven't created those yet. So let's come in here in our getters and setters. There'll be 3 string first name, with our get set, string last name, again with our get set, and string empnum with again our get set. So those are right there our three variables. The reason I did that is now I can come in here and say first name equal first name, last name equal last name, and empnum equal empnum. All right, so now that shouldn't be a string, that should be an int. That's why it was giving me an error there. All right. So what doesn't it like here? Well, that should be the capital E. All right, so emp, better spell it the same. There we go. So there is my employee class as far as we have now put in first name, last name, and employee number. We've got a full arg constructor in there. We've got our getters and setters. What we don't have is this virtual string method that's called display text. All right, I'm going to copy the virtual string display text, that part, and let's put in that now. So this will be our well, I guess I did it like that, so that's fine. Display text method. All right, so there it is. It has to be public. Guess it doesn't have to be, but we're making it public. Public virtual string display text. And then in here, okay, we're not returning anything yet, and that's why we're getting that error. So what we want to return in here is we'll put in name plus first name plus a blank space plus last name plus after last name. Then we're going to put a new line in here. Since we're putting in a new line and we're going to end up putting this into a text box, we need the \r\n, not just a \n, plus that we can put it all in here. Employee number plus empnum. Now, wrap your hands or whatever around this. This means that when we call display text, if we were to call it on something that was a regular employee, it would have name and a space, and then their first name, space, then their last name. Then on the next line, it would have followed by their employee number. All right, now that should make sense, because if I go back and I look in here at one of these, got to be down near the bottom. So again, name, first name, space, last name, employee number, and then the number. So that's exactly what we set up on there. Now, we set this up, all right, and we set this up as an employee. There won't technically be a real, just an employee, all right? So we probably could have come in there and made that abstract. All right, it's not giving me any errors. So I think we can do that. Remember what abstract means. Abstract means we cannot create an instance of employee. All right, we are creating employee so we can base other classes off of this. All right, now on your test, I don't know if you're asked to make any abstract classes. If you are, I'd expect that word in there. And if you're not asked, then it would be up to you. So we've now come in and we've created, going back again and looking in here, we've come in and we've done the validator class and we've done the employee class. So The next would be our hourly employee, as you can see right here. So we'll do that next. So I'm going to do a file save all on here, and I'm going to close my employee.cs class. I'm just going to close it because I don't want to take a chance of writing on the wrong one or whatever. So I'm going to come in here now into my class library, employee library, I should say, and choose an add into another class. And this one will be called hourly employee.cs. There it is. I will again make this public. All right. And just like I did before, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go back to here, find this hourly employee class, and I'm going to put in this. All right. So just let me paste that in. Now, hopefully you've already noticed, you're like, hey, wait a minute, you forgot something here. Yes, I did. Because hourly employee inherits from employee. We'd run into problems if we didn't do that. Now it's giving us an error, and it's giving us an error because it's saying, hey, you don't have in here, you don't have an employee first name, an employee last name, and an employee number. We don't have those in there. All right. And since we don't, it doesn't know what the heck to do. All right. So we're going to add that stuff right now. Okay. So let's start. Again, we will put in our full arg constructor. And for now, all I'm going to put in here is just public hourly employee. Now, I'm not going to make one of these. It's going to be empty. I'm not going to do that. But for now, that's what it's going to look like. Public hourly employee. Don't worry about the error. It'll go away. But I first want to come in here and I want to add my getters and setters. Okay. So I'm going to come in here and say decimal hours worked. And again, there'll be a get set and decimal hourly rate with my get set. All right. And I'm doing that. So now I can come in here and I can say, I'm going to put these each on their own line so you can see everything that's going on. All right. So string first name, string last name, int emp number, decimal hours worked, decimal hourly rate. All right. And now I can come in here and I can say, well, before I do that, remember what we want to have happen here. So I'm going to do a colon base, and I'm going to say, hey, parent, and the parent is employee. We're going to say, hey, parent, to handle first name, last name, and the employee number. You have to handle those. And you'll notice now all of my errors are gone. And just so you know, these are names here. All those names are names of what we refer to as formal parameters. If you don't, I'm using the full thing here to be descriptive, but if you want to just come in here and say FN for first name, LN for last name, EN for employee number, HW for hours worked, and HR for hourly rate, it would work just fine. I'm doing it the way I'm doing it because, in my humble opinion, all right, I am creating something that is at least somewhat self-documenting. All right, so the only two things I have to handle in here are hours worked, and that's going to be equal to hours worked and hourly rate. Okay, so that's all I need to handle in this constructor because the first name, the last name, and the employee number are going to be handled by the parent. All right. And then finally, all right, like we did before, I guess I will bring that back just for a second. I'm going to copy this and make my changes to it. Okay. So again, let me close my employee and let me go and add this. All right. And don't worry if there's any errors, they'll be fixed in a second. All right. Now we don't want to say public virtual. We want to override the other one. So I want to say public override. All right. And when we override, well, we don't need any of this stuff now. This is why we're doing the override. This all gets replaced with base dot display text. All right. That handle now, that will print out our first name, or a space, our last name on one line with the title name. Then on the next line, it'll say employee number with a space, and it'll print out the employee number. So all we have to add to this then is our hours worked. And I'm going to do that as a, oops, sorry, as a dot toString, and I'm going to put it with an N2, 2 decimal places. All right. And then again, it's \r\n, and this will be hourly rate. All right. And that'll be plus hourly rate dot toString, and this will be formatted with currency. Why? Because that's the way it's normally done. All right. Again, I will save this, but as of right now, to my knowledge, this is done. So we came in and made our full arc constructor, and we made sure that the parent would handle first name, last name, and employee number. Okay. All right. And probably all I need in here is system. So let me do a file, save all. I'm an advocate of if I don't need certain text, why put it? And for employee, I'm going to get rid of these also. I don't think I need these either. So right now, I came in and I put into my form file my constants and my one global variable. Then I created my abstract class here that you see, which is an employee. And then we did our hourly employee. All right. So the only one that's left in here is going to be our piece worker employee. So let's make that one right now. So again, in here, in my employee library, which currently has employee.cs, hourly employee.cs, and validator.cs. And I'm going to double check. Yep, it's got the right namespace. Let's just check all three of these. So does that. And so does that. Good. So let's add our piece worker employee. So I'm going to right mouse click on my employee library, choose add, go down to class, call this piece worker dot, I'm sorry, piece, is it piece worker? Piece worker employee, piece worker employee dot cs. And there that is. As always, start by removing these. Start by coming in here and making this public. And again, this is going to be a child, or it will inherit from employee. All right. And just like before, it's giving me this error because it's telling me when you look right here, it says, hey, there's no argument for first name. If we added that, it would give me another error and say there's no argument for last name. If we gave it that, it would again come back and say there's no argument for employee number. So notice first name of employee string, that's first name. string, and that's last name, and int, that's employee number. All right. So we'll fix those right now. Let's go back to our specs. And as I've been doing it on here, let's grab this. All right. And again, I will put it in same way I've been doing it. All right. So again, nothing surprising here. Again, I will add, I'm going to do it the same way I did the other one. So full arg instructor. So this will be public, piece worker, employee, and it's going to give me errors when I do this because it's expecting stuff I'm not giving it. But again, let's give it the getters and setters. So I'm going to say decimal and doesn't matter the order we do these, but I'm going to say int pieces, and there'll be a get set decimal price per piece. And again with a get set. So those are our getters and setters. So now we can come down here and do what we have to do. All right. And again, the names that you choose here are arbitrary unless you're given them in your requirements. So in here, I'm going to do it the same way I did it before. And that is, I'm going to come in here and say string, first name, same way we did it before. String, last name, int, emp num. Now we're going to say int pieces and decimal price per piece. All right, but again, just like before, we're going to come in here and say colon base, and that'll handle our first name, our last name, and our employee number. Exact same way we did it before. Much of programming, if you haven't already figured this out, is going in and there's a lot of repetition in it. All right, so pieces equal pieces. Oops. And price per piece equal price per piece. Okay, so that's done. Our getters and setters are done. Let me go back and basically I'm just going to copy from our hourly employee. I'm going to copy this. Now it's going to have to change, of course, because it's a different class. But like I said, I'm all about consistency when I can do it. So I'll have my base. So this will be pieces. And this will be pieces dot toString. And since that's an int, there's no formatting that we have to do at all on that. And this will be price per piece. And that'll be right here, price per piece. And it will be a toString with a currency. So now, to my knowledge at least, I've come in here. All right, I've come in here and I have put everything in. Now, because I want to be consistent with what I've been showing you, I am going to do a couple more things here. All right, and I didn't even do these in the copy that I made, but I'm going to start by going here to hourly employee. All right, so I'm going to come in here and under the full arg constructor, I'm going to come in and I'm going to put that in just like that. Notice what it filled in for me. First name, last name, etc. Employee number. Okay, I'm in the hourly employee, so it put all of that stuff in there. Good. So in the summary, I'm going to write full arg constructor for hourly employee class. This will allow us to instantiate an hourly employee with a first name, a last name, an employee number, and hours worked, and an hourly rate. Now that's more than I really need to put in, but you get the idea. All right. And this will be, I'm just going to put in here employee first name. This will say employee last name. This will say employee number, and I'll put in here 1000 through 99.99. This will say hours worked, and I'll put in here 0.00 through 84.00. And finally, this will be the hourly rate. And I'll put again in here 0.00 through 99.99. So that might be a little bit of overkill, but at least you can see this. I am adding in here a bunch. I mean, a bunch. All right. In fact, I'm going to grab this summary thing that's here, and I'm going to use that in just a second and modify it, but I'm going to put that in for my piece worker employee. All right. So getters and setters. All right. If I want, I can put in here, again, I don't need a summary, but what I could put something in there, but underneath this, I'm going to put in return. All right. And I'm going to say here, returns a decimal representing worked. Okay. And then we'll do the same thing down here. Now, like I said, I'm doing a little bit of overkill here, and you get that probably if you're looking at it. All right. So again, same kind of thing here. And this will be my return, right? And this one will say returns a decimal representing hourly rate. All right. Finally, we'll put one last one down here. Again, no summary, but I will put return here. That says returns. Maybe that is supposed to be an S. I don't remember. So let's quickly check and see if that's supposed to be return or returns. I don't remember. So let's see, it's in chapter 16 and it's XML documentation. So let's see. It is returns with an S. Okay. Now I don't have any params in here, so there's not really anything there to put in. So returns, returns. All right. And again, in here, I'm just going to put in exactly the same way we did it before, and that is returns a decimal representing hours. Actually, this one is hourly rate. So hourly rate, which means this one is hours worked. wait a minute, hold on. So this one is hours worked. This one is hourly rate. All right. And this returns a string with all hourly employee info, something like that. All right. So there's that one. And let's add it to the other ones as well. It's just good practice. All right. I don't want to bore you, but I want to tell you a very quick story. Okay. I was a programmer for about 5 years, and then I was offered the job of going into education. All right. I went into education and I taught at a technical college in northern Wisconsin for 3.5 years. I left there. There was a lot of internal turmoil. There were things that were promised to me that were not granted to me. The biggest thing was I was teaching at 3 different campuses. So there were days I taught at all three, and I had to drive 100 miles between the 3 campuses. And it was just too much. All right. So the reason I'm telling you that is what I did then was I went back into industry for a year and I was a programmer analyst for an aerospace company. And they didn't just do aerospace, they did other things too. They made governors for airplanes and they made other things. The reason I'm telling you that, I was there a week and I realized I didn't want to work for this place. All right. But there was a lot of stuff going on in my personal life I couldn't quit. All right. I had a wife, I had a child on the way, etc. Second child. All right. So I couldn't quit. But they asked me to basically create this big order entry system for them. And I did. All right. So I created this big order entry system for them. And um, literally, it was thousands of lines long. It was the biggest single thing from scratch I'd ever done in my life. It was probably around 7 to 8,000 lines of code. All right. But what I added to that was about the same amount of code as comments. I put complete program runs in my comments to say, when you run this, you should get results that look like this. And I explained everything. The reason I did that, even though it slowed down the execution of the program, they only ran it once a day and they ran it at like 2 in the morning. So timing was not an issue. But I knew I wasn't going to be staying there that long. And after a year, I left. And the person who ended up taking over that from me, I asked him to look at the order entry system. And I said, his name was Mark. And I said, Mark, does this all make sense to you? And he laughed. And he said, I've never seen anything so well documented. All right. And he said, I don't know how I could have questions on anything. Okay. So the bottom line is you can't have too much internal program documentation. And that's what I'm adding here. All right. So that was our hourly employee. So let me do a file save all. Let's bring up our piece worker employee, and we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to come in here. Oops. And in my summary, I'm going to steal it from the last one and just make a couple changes. All right. Full hour constructor for the piece worker. How did I do that? Employee class. This will allow us to instantiate a piece worker employee with a first name, a last name, an employee number, what else was in here? A number of pieces, and a price per piece. All right, I think I put in here like employee first name. Let's make sure that's the way I did it. Yep, okay. Employee last name. Employee number. Again, must be between 1,000 and 99.99. A number of pieces made. I think that was between 0 and 100. And this was the price per piece. And that was between 0 and $1. All right. So there's that information. Now for our getters and setters, I'm going to grab one of these that I used before. Okay, just so I've got something that I can basically use. Okay, and I'll paste that in. That's going to give me a bunch of garbage that I don't want, but that's okay. Again, I'm not going to put a summary in here. So this returns an integer representing number of pieces made. All right, and then we'll have another one down here. And again, nothing in there. And I'll put a returns in. And this will be returns a decimal representing price per piece. All right. And then for that display text, I really don't even need that line here. So I'm going to remove that. I move that. I think that's all I can remove here, but I'm going to remove those from here as well. I don't need that. And I don't need that. All right. So this is what I want from here. And I'm going to come down over to here. And again, I don't want anything in there. And in here, this should say returns a string. And this one says returns a string with all piece worker employee info. All right, so those have all now all been done. Okay, that's all finished. Okay, so I've got everything in there. It did bloat these a little. They're almost 70 lines. And out of those 70 lines, probably about 50 are documentation. But anybody who looks at this program should be able to understand everything that's in here. All right. So I don't know. I may ask you to go and add some uh, XML documentation to your test. I don't know yet. All right. So let's go back and look at employee. All right. So let me grab this, and just like we did before. All right. This will be employee first name, employee last name, and this will be employee number. Again, it must be between 1,000 and 99.99. Now, since this class is abstract, remember, we're not actually going to create an employee. So we'll put in here abstract employee class representing the information all employees have in common, i.e., a first name, a last name, and an employee number. Okay, so we've got all those. Let's grab one of these. It doesn't matter which one, but I'm going to just grab one of these. And really, this isn't exactly returning something. Well, I guess it is. So we'll put it in there. I guess so. All right, so we'll put that in there for the employee. So, oops, we need here our ending returns. There we go. So returns a string representing employee first name. All right, let's go and just grab all this. And this will be returns a string representing employee's last name. And finally, returns a string representing employee number. All right, so we've got all that. And I think we added something here too. So again, we don't need that summary line. Returns a string with first name, last name, and employee number. All right, so I have now gone in and added both regular standard documentation and XML documentation. All right, so files, save all. Now, maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm going to now close my employee class, close my hourly employee class. I'm going to close my pieceworker employee class. So now, hopefully at least, I'll be able to solely concentrate here on my actual program. All right. So if we look at this right now, if we look at this, we've got 3 buttons. All right, calculate, we're not right now doing anything. Clear, we're not doing anything. Exit, we've got our old exit program or not. We've got a show message. So why don't we start, because I like to get the easiest stuff out of the way right away. All right, why don't we start with our clear routine? All right, and as I did yesterday, I did this a little bit differently. All right. In fact, one thing I'm going to do in here is I'm going to just call it something different. Rather than clear all, I'm going to call it clear and set focus. I mean, again, you can call these things whatever you want. So private, void, clear, and set focus. All right. Now, I am going to break this down into 3 different things. Okay. So I'm going to call clear common info, and I'm going to explain each one of these in just a minute. Make type info invisible and txt first name dot focus. Now, other than that last line I just put in, very little of that might make sense to you. So let's look at it. All right. Well, what information is in common and what is not? Every employee has a first name, has a last name, has a union member status, has an employee number. All right, this wasn't part of our class. We could have made it in there and put it in there as a Boolean just as easily. We could have added that and it would have been fine. All right, but the point is, this is the common information, the stuff that's right here. That stuff. What's not common is what's in here, because this will differ. Remember, if we chose hourly employee, This will say hours worked, and that'll be like a TXT hours worked. And this will be hourly rate, and that'll be like a TXT hourly rate. If we choose piece worker employee, this will be number of pieces in TXT pieces and price per piece, TXT price per piece. All right. The reason that I mentioned that to you, the reason I'm telling you that is when we clear the common information, there's a lot of stuff that we have to do. All right. So let's write that one first. And I'm going to comment this one out right now just so I won't get an error. So private, it'll be a private void, clear, common info. And that'll be pretty easy. TXT first name dot text equals double quote TXT last name dot text equal double quote CHK union member dot checked will be false. TXT employee number dot text equals double quote TXT results, and that's that big text box that's at the bottom, dot text equals double quote. And then finally, we don't want either one of our radio buttons set. So rad hourly employee dot checked is false, and rad piece worker employee dot checked equal false. That's all of the common stuff. Right there. So if we look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things we're clearing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we're clearing 6 things and then setting the focus back to here. All right, maybe we shouldn't even set the focus back to there. I don't know. Maybe we should set one of these as a default. These are all things we can do if we want to. All right, that's going to be driven by any requirements you have and or you talking to people who are going to use the program that you're writing and saying, what do you want? If the company has 75% hourly employees and 25% piece workers, you might want to set that one and turn that on by default. Or if it's got vice versa with 75% piece workers and 25% hourly, you'd set that one as the default. All right. But now I haven't done much, but let me save this and let me run this. Should run. All right. But I'm going to set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things right here. Okay. These I haven't done yet. So we'll handle that in a minute. But this should now have neither one checked. That should be empty. That should be empty. That should be unchecked. And that should be empty when I press clear. And bingo. So all that is right now. It is working. All right. So we have now cleared our common information. The next one that we wanted to do in here was make type info invisible. Okay. So let's, down below this, let's write that one. All right. Now in here, what do we have to think about? All right. We want to make sure that's empty, that's empty, that's empty, and that's empty. And it's more than just those 4 things. All right. We also have tags that are associated with these. Right now, when you look, there is no tag in there. There is no tag in there. So what do you mean, Jeff? We have tags. We're going to add those programmatically to let the system know that if we chose hourly, this is hours worked. If we chose hourly, this is hourly rate. If we chose piece worker, this is number of pieces. If we chose piece worker, this is, and then that's our price per, and all right, and the same kind of thing with the headings. So for this one, there's a little bit more work that we're going to do, and that's right here. So I'm going to put it in. So remember these text boxes, we called it text box 5 dot text, and that's going to be equal to nothing. The other one was text box 6 dot text. That's going to be equal to nothing. We want to make sure that the tag for text box 5 is equal to nothing, and that the tag for text box 6 is dot 6 dot tag is equal to nothing. And we want those labels and those text boxes to be invisible. We're not even going to have the visible properties set. So we're going to say label 5 dot visible equal false, label 6 dot visible equal false, text box 5 dot visible equal false, and text box 6 dot visible equal false. I mean, that's a mouthful. That should be a little t. All right. So that's that one. Now, I'm not going to be able to do much with that, but when we run it, I can again put something in here. I can choose this, put something in there, check that, put something in here. Now I can put something in here and in here. And when I click clear, whoa, well, something's wrong. This isn't clearing and this isn't clearing. So let's look at it. This is why you write a little bit and then you test. Okay. So let's see. This is make type info visible, and I never undid that. There we go. So let's file, save all, and let's try it again. Now clear, it all cleared, and notice these even went away. So they're not showing right now. All right. Now, do I really want to do that? It's something that I can do, and I'll make them visible with the right stuff, depending on which of these buttons I check. All right, so I'm going to leave it for now, at least the way that it is. All right, so let's exit. And as of right now, to my knowledge, we've got our global constant set. We've got our global variables set. We've got the clear button working, and we've got the exit button working. So of course, the hard one is what's left. All right. And that is coming in here and setting up the and setting up our calculate. Well, notice we got here form 1 load. We could also call in here to make sure that when the program starts to run, we can call this to make sure that when the program first runs, and let me show you this quickly. I'm going to comment this line out. And when I run the program, you'll notice we've got all 4 of these in here. But this is when the form loads into memory. Now it looks a little cleaner. They're not shown in here. Is this the best way of doing it? I don't know. All right. But this is the way that I chose to run or to write this program. This is 100% my creation, not taken out of any book, not taken out of anything. So if you like it, great. If you don't, that's okay too. All right. So let's go in and let's start with our calculate. And we're going to put some code in here. We'll put some code in here, but we're also going to end up calling a lot of routines. in here. We're going to write a bunch of other routines, but we're going to put some code in here. Now, is that a good idea? Probably not, but again, it's the way I did it. So I'm going to put in a bool success. All right. I'm not even going to set it to true. I'm not setting it period. And I'm going to say, make sure one of the radio buttons was checked. All right. You can't figure out what to put into those labels and text boxes if we don't know what kind of employee we have. So if not, Brad hourly employee dot checked, and again, I tend to over parenthesize, but that's me. And not, I don't want hourly, I want piece worker. So if neither one of these is checked, don't want that and there. So if not this and not, so what does this say? Rad, piece worker, employee. Isn't that what I called that? We're going to double check. Okay. So if neither one of these is checked, I'm going to call my old show message. That should be a big S. I used to always start my methods with small s's, but since they recommend large S, methods that you write to start them, since Muroc recommends uppercase, that's what I've been doing. So show message, you must choose an employee type radio button. And we'll say here, neither radio button selected, like that. Now, there's no sense in going on, so we just return. That's it. Now we can check this. All right. So let's do a file save all because I haven't saved in a bit. And let's save or run it rather. And I'm going to run it and I'm not going to choose either one. I want to see if I get that message. So there's my message. So nothing is chosen. I'm going to click calculate. All right. Neither radio button selected. You must choose an employee type radio button. Okay. Now we could have come in here. Maybe it would have been better since I put that into a group box. I could have put in here employee type. All right. I kind of thought it was self-evident, but I mean, if you wanted to, we could come in here, click on the box. This is our group box. We could put text in there that says employee type like that. I don't know if that's a great thing to do or not. It's pretty small, but it's okay the way it is. Let's go in here. I'm not going to make it as big as the other ones, but let's bold it. We'll make it 12-point font and Arial so it sticks out a little. There we go. Again, we didn't have to do that. What I like to do is I like to try to set up my interface so that no matter how inexperienced the person is who's running it, they can figure out what it is they're supposed to be doing. All right. And again, that's just my point of view here. Okay. So we've got this. We could have put this into a routine too. All right. Let's do that. So we'll say private void is a radio button checked. All right. So we're going to, very similar to what we've done before, we'll have bool retval. We'll set it equal to true. We'll make sure that this returns a Boolean. All right. And in this case, we'll say retval equal false, and we will return retval. I'm literally rewriting this before your very eyes, not to impress you, but I want to try to not put a ton of actual code into a button if I can help it. So I'm going to say here, bool success equal is a radio button checked. All right, if not success, so if it returned false, return. That's pretty simple. It should work exactly the same way that it did before, but let's double check. So if neither is checked, all right, neither radio button selected, you must select a radio button. If I do check one of them, it's not doing anything yet, but I'm not getting back my error message. Right? So it is, the program right now is reacting exactly the way that we want it to react. Okay? Now, what I want to do next is I want to validate my common fields. We have, as far as common fields go, all right, as far again as common fields go, we've got what? First name, last name, this, but we don't have, this can be left unchecked, remember. So it's really first name, its last name, and its employee number. Just those three fields. All right. But what I'm going to say now is, okay, so if I get down to here, a radio, so we're going to say here, verify that a radio, verify that either the hourly employee or the piece worker employee radio button is on. I'll say is checked because that's actually what it is. Okay, so if we get down to here, either the hourly employee or the piece worker employee radio button was checked. All right, we know that it has to be. All right, because otherwise we returned up here if neither one was checked. So validate that the first name, last name, and employee number, which I called common fields for any type of employee, meet the requirements. In other words, and I could write this out, we don't want first name to be empty. We don't want last name to be empty. We don't want employee number to be empty. We don't want employee number to be non-numeric. We don't want employee number to be less than 1,000 or greater than 99.99. All right. So again, this is going to, I'm going to say here then, success equal, and we're going to call this validate common fields, which hasn't been written yet, hence the error that we're getting. So let me grab this. So we're going to write that right down here. It'll be another private bool, validate common fields. All right. And now on this one, for the first time at least, what we're going to do is we're going to use our validator class. All right. We may end up getting an error in here, and I'm actually hoping we do, so I can show you how we fix it, because it's pretty doggone easy. All right. We'll make another bool here. We'll call it success again. It doesn't hurt. We'll assume it's true. All right. And we're going to have a string that we're going to call error message, ERRMSG. And we're going to set that equal to the empty string. All right. So we're setting success to true and error message equal to that. Now this error message now we want to make our validation checks, i.e. number one, first name cannot be empty. All right. Number two, last name cannot be empty. Number three, employee number must be an integer. And number four, employee number must be an integer between, move that over, integer between 1,000 and 99.99. Okay, so that's going to be our validation checks. That's what we're going to do right here. So I'm going to say error message plus equal. Now I think it's going to give me an error here, and I'm almost hoping it does. Validator dot, okay, it is. And I'm going to change that in just a second. Dot is present. All right. Now I'm going to manually change this. I'm going to get an error. We'll fix it momentarily. All right. So validator dot is present. All right. And it's going to be txt first name dot text. And if you do look, if we go back to here, and I'm going to bring up our properties window, move this up. First name does have a tag of first name. Last name does have a tag of last name. Employee number has a tag of employee number. All right. Those three are built in, so to speak. We set them up however you want to say it. Now we're getting errors. We're going to fix those errors in just a minute. All right, we're getting errors, two of them here. Number one, because we're not returning anything, and it's supposed to return a bool. We'll fix that in a second. Second of all, the system has no idea what the heck validator means. We're going to fix that in a minute. So txt first name dot tag dot. All right. Then we're going to do the exact same thing, but with last name. And again, you can see the errors that we're getting. We're going to fix those in about a minute or two. All right. Then next, we want to say, I'll just paste this in. We'll make changes. And this one has got to be is int 32. And this will be txt employee number dot text and txt employee number dot tag dot toString. All right. So there's three. There's only one more we have to do. So I'm going to copy this and paste it down here. All right. This is the is within range. As soon as it lets me highlight it, there we go. All right. And so this doesn't run off the page, let's put each one of these on their own line. And this is the employee number. So we've got a min employee number and we've got a max employee number. All right. I'm going to actually, even though it's a little bit of overkill here, I want to put all this stuff. I want to make this so you can read everything I'm doing here. Now, you probably have already figured this out, but why? What's the problem here? Validator doesn't exist within the current context. It's a simple fix. I go to here, I go down to the bottom, and I add my reference to the employee library. The errors went away, and it added that line up on top. Now we are bringing in our actual employee library. I don't think we're going to need either of those, so I'm going to remove that. All right. And you see now min number and max number are no longer grayed out because they are being used. All right. Okay. So we now have these checks. Cool. All right. Well, this is very similar to what we done earlier. I'm going to say if error message is not equal to the empty string. Well, what do we know? There, but not there. One or more errors, validation errors were found. Okay. So if that's the case, well, we want to say success equal false. All right. Because it didn't work. And we'll do a show message. And I'm just going to use my error message. And I'm going to just say, the following errors have been found. That's good enough. All right. And then finally, I want to return success. So now, with what I've done thus far in here, I should be able to come in. You already saw this, that if we don't have a radio button chosen, come on. And if we don't have a radio button chosen, we get that. All right, so let's choose one. Now what are we getting? First name is a required field. Last name is a required field. Employee number must be a valid integer value. Let's just run the gamut here. So I'll put in a first name. Now we get last name is required. Employee number must be a valid integer. Now we just get employee number must be a valid integer. We'll get the same thing if we put something non-numeric in there. All right. If we put something out of range, so less than 1,000, we get employee number must be between 1,000 and 99.99. Also here 10,000, which is again out of range, and we get the same thing. But if we do put in a valid value, we're good. All right. So we now have validated our common fields. This one isn't a validation. Remember, since it's a checkbox, it can either be yep, it's checked, or nope, it ain't checked. All right. So that's basically what we want to do in there. All right. So what we want to do in here now is what? Let's think about it. Okay. Well, we came in here and we said success equal validate common fields. All right. Well, that's pretty cool. That's fine. In fact, that's not really a big thing. But what we have to do now is we have to figure out which of these were checked. So was the hourly employee checked, or was the piece worker employee checked? All right. So right here, remember, we've got here, if we didn't have success, we return. So we can copy that, put it right here. If there were validation errors found, return. All right. So if not success, return. If we get down to here, okay, then we're going to want, we know that success worked. All right. In other words, everything was kind of cool. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to be able to figure out what kind of employee we had. I want to say that again. We want to find out what kind of employee we had. All right. So I'm going to say if, so we know there were no errors. So if Brad hourly employee dot checked, all right, we're going to say success equal validate hourly employee. Because now we have to come in here. We've got all this, but we're going to have to set this up and validate it. All right. Else, if rad pieceworker employee dot checked, then we want to say success equal validate pieceworker employee. Now, neither of these have been written yet, so I'm getting errors on both these lines. So let's comment that out for now, and let's write this one right now. All right. And again, I'm always in favor of just writing these things in a very straightforward manner like this. So I'm going to put it down here. It'll be a private bool because it'll be success again. And it's validate hourly employee. All right. And let's just to make it simple, I can have a bool ret val equal true. That's fine. And I'm going to say return ret val. Now there's a bunch of stuff I've got to put in here. But for now, I'm going to just put this in like this. And now on here, I'm going to validate pieceworker employee right there. Why? So I can now take the line that I commented out. Where are you? There you are. And uncomment that. All right. So I should not have any errors in my code right now. And it looks like I don't. That's good. All right. So we want to validate. We've got some validation to do, in other words. Okay. So first, let's validate our okay. All right. So if this is an hourly employee, we know a few things. We know that that's been checked right there. Since that's been checked, this should say hours worked. This should say hourly rate. This should hold the value for hours worked that must be between 0 and 84. This must hold the value for hourly rate, which must be between 0 and 99.99. We know all that now. All right. So that's what we're going to basically be checking in here. As soon as I find it, there we go. Validate hourly employee. All right, we'll have our bool. I've got red val. We can make it success. It doesn't matter. We'll make it success. And we'll also again have string ERR MSG that will set equal to the empty string. All right. And here we're going to return success. All right. But we want to make similar checks to what we made before. Now, though, what we can do is we can say text box 5 dot tag is now going to be equal to hours worked. is going to keep it all lowercase. It doesn't matter. And text box 6 dot tag is going to be equal to hourly rate. All right, so we can go in and we can set the tags, set the tag property for the hours worked and hourly rate text boxes. I know that's a little redundant. You can probably figure that out yourselves. But again, I'm trying to come in here and put a lot of comments in so you can see exactly what's going on. All right. Now I'm going to grab these. I'm going to make some changes, but I'm going to grab these so I don't have to do a lot of retyping. Okay. Where are you? There we go. So now I have to validate that hours worked 1 is a decimal value and 2 is within range. Remember, hours worked was 0.00 through 84.00. Also, I also want to validate that hourly rate is a decimal value and is within range. And that is 0.00 to 99.99. All right, so those are the checks that I'm going to make in here. Let me hit enter a couple times. All right, now these are wrong right now, but don't worry about it. We're going to fix them all right now. So this has to be is decimal, and that's going to be text box 5 dot text, and this is going to be text box 5 dot tag dot to string. All right, so that's going to do the is decimal, and for the is within range, this will again, so I'm going to have to make some changes. So a text box 5 dot text, and again, this will be text box 5 dot tag dot to string, and this will be min, is it min hours? Yep, and max hours. All right, to try to make this read a little bit better, I'm going to break this up. All right, now I'm going to copy these and paste them in right here, but now this is going to be 6. This is going to be 6, 6, 6, not 65, 6, 6, 6, and this is going to be min rate. Is that what we called it? Min H rate, min H rate, and max H rate. All right. So you can hopefully see in there everything that I'm doing. Hopefully you can see in there everything that I'm doing. All right. And now I can come down here. And what did we write before? Okay, well, I know I've got it in here someplace. There we go. Verify no errors were found. If errors, it could be error, or it could be errors found, show in message box. All right, so I'm going to grab all of this code right here, and I'm going to copy that into right here. It's the same thing. All right, so coming back up here now, there's the success, and I'm going to say, again, just like we did up above, down below, I guess. I'm just going to put it here. Errors found, return. So if not success, return. All right. So now we should be able to quickly verify the stuff for our hourly rate. Now it's not complete, so don't let that worry you. All right. So files, save all. So if I come in here now and I choose hourly, and I'm going to put something in there and something valid in there. And now when I click calculate, the following errors were found. No hours worked, no hourly rate. All right. I haven't put in the code yet to add these. We're going to do that in a bit, but you can see that part's working. All right. Now we have to write something similar to what we just did. All right. With this validate, but now we're going to be validating the piece worker. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Let me come in here and add this. So we'll put that in. All right. And now I'm going to go down and I'm going to grab my validate hourly employee. I'm going to grab the whole flipping thing, copy it to the clipboard, and put it in here. Now it's going to give me errors because it says I did it twice. So this will have to change to piece worker. All right. Now these tags will have to change. So these tags will change. This will be pieces because it's now a piece worker employee. And this will be price per piece. All right, so here we want to validate that pieces is an integer value. And that it is within range, which means it's between 0 and 100. All right, so this is not going to be an is decimal. This will be is int 32. And this won't be min hours and max hours. This will be min pieces and max pieces, like that. All right, we also have to validate that the price per piece is a valid decimal value and is within range. So that was between 0 and $1. That's all correct that's in here. Everything that's in here is correct, except we need min price per piece and we need max price per piece. All right. If there are no errors, we're going to just return success. If there were errors, we're going to set it to false, give that message and return. So now we should be able to come in. Again, we're not done yet, but we're getting there. So now if I choose piece worker and I do put something in here and in here and in here, now I should get the piece worker errors. Pieces must be a valid integer value. Price per piece must be a valid integer value. Okay, so everything right now is working. It's not complete, but I have now validated, I'm going to say this again. I have now validated that indeed I have a decimal value. In this case, I have a decimal value in for my price per piece. I have an int, and it's within range. I have an integer value that's also within range. This is if it's a piece worker, and if it is a hourly worker, I've got an hour's work that is a valid decimal within range, and that for the hourly rate, I've got a valid decimal value and it's within range. So this is good. I've got a lot of my work out of the way. All right. So what do I want to do now? Well, what I know is now I'm going to be able to instantiate either a new hourly employee, or I'm going to be able to instantiate a new piece worker employee. All right. So in other words, and I'm going to comment these both out right away, but in here, in my calculate, notice what I'm doing. I'm calling something. If it didn't work, I'm returning. Then I'm calling something. If it didn't return, if it didn't work, I'm returning. Then I'm checking, and based on this, I'm calling something. If it didn't work, I'm returning. Or I'm calling this, and if it didn't work, I'm returning. But if I get down to here, it was successful. So now I can instantiate an hourly employee object. All right. And down here, if I get to this point, I can instantiate a piece worker employee object. So I am going to call both of those routines right now. They're not written, but I'm going to write the code in there. So I'm going to say instantiate hourly employee. I'm not going to say object, just instantiate hourly employee. Now it's giving me an error because I haven't written it yet. So I'm going to comment it out for right now. And down here, I'm going to say instantiate piece worker employee. And again, since I haven't written it, it's giving me an error. All right. So this first one, this instantiate hourly employee, I'm going to come down, and after all the other stuff, right up above clear, see how big this is getting now. I don't think I'm going to need to return anything. So private void instantiate hourly employee. All right. So now I can take this one that we had in there that we commented out. Where are you? You're up here someplace. And now we can uncomment that. And we're going to put in this one right now, right below it. So that is line 85. So this will be instantiate piece worker employee. If I go back up to line 85, that should not be an error anymore once I uncommented. All right. So I'm going to take a very quick break, 5 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and continue by writing the instantiate hourly employee, and then I'm going to write the instantiate piece worker employee. Okay. So I'm going to do those next. So I will be back then, I don't know, in about 5 minutes. It's 9:55. I'll resume again at 10 o'clock. All right, then I'm going to continue on. So as mentioned, let's first write the instantiate hourly employee. All right, so let's see. Well, before we instantiate it, we have to fill in some of the stuff. If you say, I don't know what you mean, yeah, I think you actually do. So let's take a quick look here and let's say this. I'm going to say int the employee number is equal to convert dot to int 32 txt employee number dot text. All right. Decimal hours equal convert dot to decimal, and that's text box 5 dot text, and decimal rate is equal to convert dot to decimal text box 6. Again, because I'm a little squirrely about this stuff. There. All right. Create variables. Employee number, hours worked, and hourly rate. Okay. Next, we want to actually instantiate an hourly employee object. Okay. So hourly employee, let's call it HE for hourly employee, equals new hourly employee. And now notice it's telling us full arc constructor. It's showing us all the stuff that we put in before for our XML comments. Okay. So what do we want to put in here? Let's put this over multiple lines. All right, just so we can see everything that's going on here. All right, so this will be txt first name. Remember, this is our common stuff. First name dot text. txt last name dot text. And it's not common now, but we need the employee number. We need the hours. And we need the rate. Probably could shorten this up a little bit. It would be a little easier to read. All right, so that's creating our employee. Now, that's fine. Now we have to figure out whether or not the employee has, we have to figure out whether or not the employee has coming any overtime. So, did employee work overtime hours greater than 40 or not? All right. This is very much similar to stuff we've seen before. If hours less than max non-OT, all right, we know employee worked less than or equal to 40 hours, no OT coming. So our gross pay, that was that variable, the only variable that we created that was global, that is equal to hours times rate. All right. Else, employee does employee worked greater than 40 hours has OT coming. All right. So the gross pay is equal to, and this is how I do it. Again, it can be done in multiple ways. Max non-OT times rate plus, then on my next line here, hours minus max non-OT times rate times OT rate. All right, so that'll handle, like I said, if the employee does have overtime coming. That last one will handle their overtime. All right, so I've instantiated, I've figured out everything. So the only thing that's left here, all right, the only thing that's left here is to put in my results. Let's put a title in here. We'll say hourly employee stats. Remember, this is going into a text box. So \R \N plus H dot display text, not hours dot, HE dot display text. That's going to handle our first name, our last name, and our employee number. Okay. Plus another \R \N plus HE dot CHK. Ooh. No, that's not part of our class. Remember, just CHK union member dot checked, because we did not make that part of our class, plus another \R \N plus gross pay plus, and that's just going to be gross pay dot toString C. Now, we can test this. Listen to me. We can test this, but we don't have the ability yet to actually be putting in stuff. All right. We don't have the ability yet to be putting in the stuff into our text boxes. All right. We're going to do that next. So even though we can test it, I'm not going to test it yet because it's still going to be giving us errors. All right. Now, in my hourly employee, I'm going to grab all of my code here, every bit of it, and I'm going to copy it in and then make changes. So this is for instantiating the hourly employee. All right. So just like we did before, we want to bring in our common fields. Then we want to instantiate, this is now a piece worker employee. All right. So this has to say piece worker employee. We're going to get errors when we do this. All right. And I'll call that PWE for piece worker employee. And this will have to be new piece worker employee. All right. We still need the first name and the last name and the employee number, but this will now be pieces and price per piece. Well, we're going to get errors on those because we got to create them up here. So int pieces equal convert to int 32. what's in that text box, and decimal price per piece is now going to be equal to convert to decimal. Now our errors are gone. Now, in here, we don't have, piece workers don't get overtime, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, we're not done yet. We're gonna have to make a couple more changes. But the first thing we want to change here is the gross pay is equal to the pieces times price per piece times 40, which is max non-OT. All right, so we'll put a comment up here. It says calculate, geez, gross pay as follows. Pieces times price per piece times 40. All right. Now, when we come in here and we write the results, this will be piece worker employee stats. This will be PWE. All right. And this will be, I think that's it. We've done a lot of junk in here. All right. And what I'd like to do before we finish this up, what we've got left to do right now, we don't have it set up in here for this stuff to be filled in. Everything else is working, so we got a lot of this done, but we've got a bit of it yet to go. So let's go back and just check what we've done thus far, because we've already gotten here 340 lines. Good morning. What I'm doing is I'm going through the pretest right now, and I've got it about 3/4 finished. So what I said I wanted to do be the last part, all right, is I want to go over everything that we've done so far. So we started out in here, we went in, and now that I'm looking at this, I don't have min H rate, so let me fix that, and then we'll go over all of it. That's min H rate. All right. So based on our requirements in the handout that I sent to you yesterday or the day before, all right, we have these global constants. I'm not going to read any of them to you, but they should all, hopefully at least, make sense to you. So every employee has an employee number, and it must fall within that range. Hourly employees must work hours within that range. Hourly employees must make an amount within that range per hour. All right, the most they can work without overtime is 40 hours. If they work greater than 40, they get a time and a half for everything over. Piece workers must make between 0 and 100 pieces per hour and must be paid between $0 per piece. This is going to be the gross pay for any type of employee. All right. Okay. So then we came in here, and this thing, all right, I want to show you what this is doing by removing it. But first I'm going to run it. And you'll notice there's nothing down here. All right. There actually are fields in here. There is a text box. I'm sorry, a label, a text box, a label, and a text box. But I've set their visible property to false by calling this. You'll notice if I comment that out and run it again, now they're there. So you'll notice that there's there are no labels, there's no title on the labels. And that's because if I click this, I want this to say hours worked, and this to say hourly rate, and this to hold whatever I put in for hours worked, and this to hold whatever I put in for hourly rate. All right. And if I choose piece worker, I want this to say something like number of pieces and have that hold number of pieces. This say price per piece, and this hold the price per piece. All right. But since I had commented that out, it's showing, but if I uncomment it, boom, it's gone. All right. Just to show you the visible property. Now, I'm going to go down a little bit. When you click the button for clearing, you'll notice I broke it up. I call clear and set focus. And clear and set focus actually calls 3 different routines. Clear common info, make type info visible, and invisible, I should say, and get the focus to the first name. Now, the common information in here is information any kind of employee has. That is, they all have a first name, they all have a last name, and they all have an employee number. Those are the things that are set up for all employees inside of our employee class. All right. What's different is what's down here, right in there. All right. So to clear that common info, I take my first name and my last name and clear. If the checkbox was checked, I uncheck it. I also clear out what was in the employee number. This TXT results, that is what goes into the big box down here. So that's cleared. And both radio buttons are unchecked. That's what I'm putting into clear common info. Then in this make type info visible, you'll notice if you look in here, it's like, hey, wait a minute, you didn't name those text boxes and labels. Yes, on purpose. Because technically, if this is checked right here, I want this to say hours worked and this to say hourly rate. But if this one is checked, I want this to say number of pieces and price per piece. So I don't give those names. I just give the names that were created when I first created them, which were text box 5 and text box 6. So I'm clearing those. All right. And I'm making so they're all cleared and they have no tags on them. You'll notice that if I come back to here in my tag property, this has a tag of first name. This has a tag of last name. This has a tag of employee number. This does not have a tag, and this does not have a tag. I will give them tags programmatically based on whether I clicked that button or that button. All right. All right. So like I said, then running through that, the only other thing that's left in there is to set the focus. And that's it. No biggie. The exit is the same thing we've been doing all semester, rather. Exit program or not. And I made a show message. Same thing we've been doing all semester. All right, so let's go up and look at where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, because there's a lot of code in here for the calculate. I tried to set it up to put as little in the calculate routine as possible, but rather have the calculate routine, have it go in and set or call routines rather than do it in there. All right, so this, as it says, verify that one or the other of these 2 radio buttons is checked. So you'll notice, let me go back to that code. Here's the code right here. All right, where is it? Right there. So is a radio button checked? If I run this and I don't check either radio button, all right, and I click calculate, all right, it says here, neither radio button selected, you must choose a radio button, etc., and the program stops. That's this. Let me move that up and double check and prove that to you. So if neither radio button is checked, that's what this check is doing, and I click calculate, it says neither radio button selected, that's the title, and you must choose an employee type radio button. That's the message. All right, and the program just returns. Okay, so that's the first thing I check for, because if I don't have a radio button checked, there's no use in going on. So if I get down to here, as it says right here, if I get down to this point, that means that either the hourly employee button was checked or the piece worker employee radio button was checked. So I call this validate common fields. What that will do is it'll use our validator class and it'll run the is present on first name to make sure it's not empty, is present on last name to make sure that's not empty. It'll run the is int 32 on employee number. I set that up as an int field, and it'll run the is within range for the employee number to verify that it is between 100 or 1099.99. So you'll notice here, if I run this and I do choose one of these, but I leave all of these, this empty, and this empty. Now I get first name is a required field. I get last name is a required field, and I get employee number must be a valid integer. If I run it again and put in just a first name, then I get the two messages. Last name is required and employee number must be a valid integer. If I put in both of these, I just get the one message. All right, it must be a valid integer. I get the same thing if I put in something non-numeric, but if I put in something out of range, this must be between 1,000 and 99.99. So if I put 999, which is out of range, I get employee number must be between 1,000 and 99.99. In the same way, if I put in here 10,000, which is out of range, I get the same error message. So all of that is working. All right, so I have now validated that one of these two must be chosen. There must be something in here. There must be something in here. There must be something in there. It must be an integer, and it must be between 1,000 and 99.99. All right, in that validator, and I took this validator right from the book. I sent you that today. All right, so that's the is present. It probably would be a good idea to come in here and do a value dot trim. It probably would be a good thing to do that to make sure that we're catching it if you just hit the space bar there. I don't know if we run that without it, if it'll grab it as an error or not, but just to be sure, I'm going to do that. All right, so that's the only thing I added was the dot trim. Other than that, this was the validator.cs program that was in the book. All right. Okay, then coming back here. All right. So if I get down to here now, again, validate common fields, and it's what I just showed you. So that is saying this is taken, I mean, the field names are different, but this is basically taken right from the book. We've got a variable called success, which is a Boolean, an error message, make our validation checks. So we want to make sure first name is not empty, last name is not empty, employee number is an integer, and employee number is between those values. Let's do this. So again, I'm running the things from our validator class. When I first put this in, I got an error. All right. And it said to fix that error, you need a using statement, which brings in our employee library. We'll look at the employee library stuff in just a moment. All right. But as soon as I put that in, it then recognized that validator was one of the fields. Validator was one of the fields that was inside of, or one of the classes that was in my employee library. So this is validating that there is something in the first name text box. This is validating there's something in the last name text box. This is validating that what was put in the employee number is an integer. And this is validating that not only is it an integer, but it is between the minimum employee number, which is 1,000, and the which is 999. You'll notice in here, if I put my mouse there, it's saying constant. It's even showing me what that value is. All right. Okay. So if I had any errors, it didn't validate. So I'm going to return false and say there was an error. The following error or errors have been found. There might be one error. There might be many errors. All right. And then we return either success if it didn't find any error, or we return, or we return true. That's what we set success to at the beginning. If there were no errors, and false if it found an error. All right. So now we've gone through and we have validated, all right, started going through our validations. So now we know if we get down to here, if there were validation errors, we're just returning, we're done. So if we get down to here, no validation errors. Check to see whether A, the hourly employee radio button was checked, or the piece worker employee radio button was checked. All right, so we're seeing which of the two radio buttons were checked. So if the hourly employee was, then we have to validate hourly employee. What does that mean? We have so far, out of all the fields that are in here, we have validated that one of these was selected, that there's something in here, that there's something in here, and that what's in here, then what's in here must be between, all right, must be between 1,000 and 99.99. But we have to make sure that this value for hours worked is between 0 and 84, and this value in here for hourly rate is between 0 and 999. All right. So that's what we're doing in the validate hourly employee. So that's down here. All right. We're setting our tag equal to that. Right. And even though I didn't do it, I think it would work. Maybe I'm wrong here. But if I said text box, didn't do this before, 5.text is equal to, that should say hourly or hours worked. And text box, good golly, text box 6.text should be equal to hourly rate. All right. I think that'll work. Let's just double check that. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in just any garbage. I'll choose hourly and put any garbage we want here, any garbage here. This doesn't matter if it's checked or not. This has to be a number between 1,000 and 99.99. All right. So if I click calculate, notice I get these. All right. But I thought maybe those would show and they're not showing yet. We'll have to fix that. All right. All right. So we've got all this stuff. Now we are checking exactly what I told you before. So we're checking that for hours worked, that this is a decimal. So that's what's in that text box. And it's between min hours, which are 0, and max hours, which are 84. If there were errors with either one of these, we're going to be adding to this error message field. Then we do the same thing for hourly rate. We make sure that there's a value in there and it's a decimal and it's between 0 and 99.99. If there were errors, show them in the message box and you'll be returning false. If there were no errors, we'll be returning true, which is what that was set to at the start. Then we have to do a similar thing, but now the similar thing we have to do is if it was not a radio button for hourly, then we have to check and see if the radio button for piece worker was checked. And we're going to do basically the same thing. All right. So if I come down here and look at that, it's almost the same thing, except I have to replace all this stuff. So this will now say text box 5.text equal number of pieces, and text box 6.text will be equal to price per piece. All right. So we're doing the same kind of thing we did earlier, doing it now for this one. In other words, we're doing it for a piece worker employee. And we again have to validate that a piece worker employee that we put in a number and that the number we put is within range. All right. And those are 0 through 100. All right. And it's a whole number because you can't make part of a piece of something. And then we do the same thing with our price per piece, that it is decimal and it's between 0 and $1. If there were errors, we will set success to false, show an error message, and return false. If there were no errors, we'll just return success as was set up at the top. All right. Then what's left as we go back up here is if it was an hourly employee and there were no errors, now we can instantiate or actually create an hourly employee. I want to say that again. We now can actually instantiate or create an hourly employee. All right. So how do we do that? I mean, there's a boatload of code in here. Notice this. We're up 360 lines basically. All right. And there's a lot of comments in here too. I did that on purpose. So how do we do this? We come in here and as it says, we create local variables representing the employee number, the hours worked, and the hourly rate. All right. So that's basically saying the stuff we stuck into those text boxes. We've already validated that the employee number is an integer, that it's within range. We have validated that our hours worked is a decimal and is within range. And we have already validated that our hourly rate is a decimal and is within range. So now that we've done all that, here's where some of the magic takes place. Now we're actually creating a new employee. And we are grabbing their first name and their last name, then their employee number, then the hours and the rate. These three things right here were what we just did up here. Then we have to figure out, did that employee work overtime? So if the hours they worked were less than, that should be less than or equal to, that's an error. So if the number of hours they worked were less than or equal to 40, they just get straight time. They have no overtime coming, so their gross is just their hours times their rate. Otherwise, they do have overtime coming, something over 40 hours. All right. So their gross pay is going to be their straight time, which is 40 hours times their rate, plus whatever hours they worked over 40 times their rate times 1.5, because overtime rate is 1.5. Then this results thing right here, we are just filling up this. And notice in there that we are grabbing this display text. We're going to go over the class in just a minute. That right there is going to automatically print out for us the person's name and the person's employee number. Then this is going to say true if the person was union and false if they were not. All right. So we could have actually put a tag in there that would have said something like union status. Probably would have been better to say that there. So union status, like that. Then we're going to have their gross pay, which we just calculated. Now, if they were a piece worker, we're doing a similar thing. Where again, we know their employee number and we know their pieces because that's what was in that text box, and we know their price per piece. That's what was in that text box. So now here's where some of the magic takes place. Here is where we instantiate or create an actual piece worker employee. We grab what was in the text box for the first name and the last name, what we just converted over from the text box for the employee number, what we just converted over from the text box for the pieces that they made, number of pieces, and we just converted over from the other text box for the price per piece. We're assuming they don't have any overtime, so we just calculate their gross pay as the number of pieces made times the price per piece times 40. And then we print out that information. And just like before, I'm going to put in here union status, like that. All right. And that was most everything that we had. We're not done yet, but that is a real big part of what we had. All right. Now, before we go and rate the rest, let's quickly go back and review the classes. I'm not going to bring up the validator class. We already looked at that. In fact, I'm going to just close that. But we first created an employee class. Here it is. And you'll notice I even came in there, it's pretty big because I put XML comments in there. All right, you get an XML comment by putting in 3 dashes instead of 2. This was in chapter 16 of our text. All right. Also, if you look, that employee class is named or labeled abstract. What that means is we cannot instantiate or create an employee, because an employee, it's like when I gave the examples in an earlier lecture when I had animal, and then underneath animal we had dog and we had cat and we had bird. Animal itself is too generic in nature, so we can make that abstract like we're doing here. The first name, the employee class will have a first name, which is a string, a last name, which is a string, and an employee number, which is an int. Plus, it'll have this virtual method called display text. In other words, every employee will have this, regardless of whether they're an hourly employee or a piece worker employee. It doesn't matter. All right. Then we've got a full arg constructor in here, and all it does is this. It sets whatever we passed in for first name to our first name property, whatever we passed in for last name to our last name property, passed in for employee number to our employee number property. And then we've got our getters and setters for the first name, for the last name, and for the employee number. Again, I added in here XML comments up the wazoo, so you can see how those are done. This display text that's in here, all right, this really should have been a capital D, but since I put it as a lowercase d in the requirements, I'm keeping it there. That's going to print out for any employee their first name, a title of name, then their first name, a blank space, and their last name. Then on a new line, employee number and a space and their employee number. So that's the employee right there. That is the employee class. All right. Then we had an hourly employee class and a piece worker employee class. This is the hourly employee class right here. All right. Again, it will have an hours worked and an hourly rate, and it will override the the display text that we just saw in the employee class. So again, we've got a full arg constructor, complete again with XML comments, and we've got a first name, a last name, and an employee number. These are all going to be handled by the employee constructor, not the hourly employee constructor. This is saying call the parent and pass the first name, the last name, and the employee number. That's what we just showed in our employee class. We are going to in here handle the hours worked and the hourly rate and set our hours worked property accordingly and our hourly rate property accordingly. Finally, in here, under the display text, notice we're calling base.display text. This right there, this here is going to print out the first name. It'll print out a title that says name, colon, then a space, then the first followed by a blank space, followed by the last name. Then on a new line, it'll say employee number with a colon and a blank space, and then it'll print out the employee number. Then underneath that, it'll print out a title of hours worked, and it'll show the hours worked to 2 decimal places. Then on the line following that, it'll show hourly rate. All right, and it'll print that out in a currency format. All right, and then finally, we've got the piece worker class. All right, we have the piece worker class. And that's here, again, complete with a boatload of XML comments. That has pieces, which is a decimal, and it has price per piece, which is a decimal. And again, it overrides the display text method. So in our full arg constructor, just like before, first name, last name, and employee number are handled by the parent, which is the employee class. This has to just handle pieces and price per piece, which is setting whatever we passed into our pieces property, whatever was passed into our price per piece property. And that's here, and that's here. All right. And then finally, we are overriding the display text that's right here. We are again calling the base.display text to print out the name title, then the first name space last name, then on a new line, the title of employee number, space, and then the employee number. Then after that on a new line, pieces, followed by pieces.toString. Since that is an integer, there's nothing special we have to do there. All right. And then price per piece, and we are formatting that to currency. All right. that is what I have done so far. I started at 8, and as you can see, I've done 2 hours and 44 minutes, and I think I took one break for 5 minutes in here. Now I want to check something first, and I'm going to go back to my actual key here because I think I'm missing something, and I want to double check. So this is the actual working copy right here, and I'm rebuilding it kind of before your very eyes, or however you'd want to refer to that. Okay, this is what I still have to write, is right here. Okay. Now, in many ways, this program is similar to the one that I showed you the last 2 days, that photo program. All right. But it's actually, this one, in my opinion, is easier than that one was. You may or may not agree with that. All right. But for the hourly employee here, all right, this hourly employee check changed. I want to put some junk in there. And then also for the pieceworker employee check changed, I want to put some junk in there. All right. So all right. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to throw it in there. And I'm going to grab this and I'm going to throw it in here. It's going to give me an error. We're going to fix that error in just a minute. All right. Now, I do want to move these up because I like to have my stuff in a certain way when I program. So I want to put that right up above my clear. So right there. All right. Now for right now, I'm just going to comment this out and I'm going to comment this out. We're going to write that routine right below this. That's called make type info visible. All right. So we'll write that in just a second. All right. Now you have to, for lack of better words, you have to kind of play computer here. All right. I can now uncomment both these and it won't give me any errors. Okay. This is the code that I want to run whenever I come into here and I click that radio button. If I click that, this is the code I want to have run. All right, and that should say worked. And let's make sure that it says, yeah, that's fine. All right. What this is doing then is if I click that button, it is taking this text box right here, and it's going, I'm sorry, this label right here, it's going to set that to hours worked. It will set the tag here for this text box to hours worked. It will set this label to hourly rate, and it will set that text box for the hourly rate. So this will become the equivalent of LBL hours worked, TXT hours worked, LBL hourly rate, TXT hourly rate. That's what I'm doing in here, in this code here. But then I have to make that stuff visible. What does that mean? all that means is I want to say label 5 dot visible equal true, label 6 dot visible equal true, text box 5 dot visible equal true, and text box 6 dot visible equal true. All right, what the heck does that even mean? It's easier for me to show you. All right, and we're going to see right now whether or not this works. So when I come in here, you'll notice that at the beginning of the program, when we start running it, there's nothing here because we call this make these invisible. When I click here, it should bring back these two labels and two text boxes. The label here should say hours worked in a blank text box. The label here should say hourly rate in a blank text box. And boom, there they are. Now, when I click here, now this should change and it should say like number of pieces, and this should be blank. This should say price per piece, and that should be blank. So now I can go back and forth. When I clear, they all go away. But what I told the system is if I go and bring this one up, I want this to show. And if I bring this one up, I want this to show. So notice now, if I run the program again, so let me exit and rerun the program. All right. So if I exit here and run the program right now and put in nothing here, I get my error message. Neither radio button selected. If I click hourly, now I've got this stuff in there. All right. If I don't put anything in and I click calculate, notice I get just my first three things. My first name, my last name, and my employee number. Let's put in a person's name. And a valid employee number. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we'll say I am a union member. Now, if I try to calculate, now it says hours worked must be valid and hourly rate must be valid. I don't know how I've got the words in there, but I've screwed that up. I'll have to fix that. That's okay. We'll fix it in a minute. All right. But if I do come in here and I put in 40 and I put in 20, now everything in here is valid. If I click calculate, oh, I got to fix that. Oh, Jeffrey. All right, so let's see. Text box tag, LBL, and that was, I did that up here, goofing around before. There, here, this text box text, this should not be set. That's the error that I had in there. So let me fix it. Now everything should work. So if I come in here, make it hourly. All right, I'll put in John Doe. John is a union member, and his employee number will be 2345. He worked 40 hours, meaning he got no overtime at $20 an hour. I click calculate. Oh, well, where am I setting that doggone thing? Oh, this is wrong. Somewhere in here, I'm setting this to hours worked and hourly rate. There it is. All right, now it should work. Try it again. And you're going to get all of this text, all of this entire project. So Jeff, Scott, 4444. I worked 40 hours, and I make $20 an hour. So it made me Jeff Scott, employee number, hours worked, hourly rate, union status is false, and I made $800. Notice if I check this and calculate again, it changed to true, and nothing else changed. I clear and put in now another hourly employee, and I put in Jane Doe, and Jane will say is a union member, and her employee number will be 7654. She worked 50 hours at $20 an hour, so she gets overtime. if I did it right, it should say 1100 for her gross. And it does. So that all works. Finally, for the piece worker, let's say that, again, this will be Jane's husband, John Doe. He won't be a union member, and his number will be 2945. The number of pieces he made has to be between 1 and 100, so we'll say 67. The price he gets per piece is 75 cents. They'll multiply this by this and then by 40. So his gross pay is pretty good, 2010. But you can see everything is set correctly. Again, if we say that he's a union member and we reset it, that changes to true. All right. Finally, if we clear this, and if I put in hourly employee, and I'll put in again, John Public, and we will say that it's 2121. If I put in nothing for hours worked must be valid, hourly rate must be valid. If I put in something that's non-numeric, I get the same message. And if I put in something out of range, so we'll put in 0 for each of these. Wow, there's an error. Oh no, 0 was legal. I'm sorry. So let's put in -9 and let's clear it. And we will do hourly and we'll make it Jane Public. We'll say she is a union member. There's her employee number. And we will say that it was -7 and -6. And now we get hours work must be between 0 and 84. Hourly rate must be between 0 and 99.99. In the same, if we put the Sally Jones, we'll say she is a union member, 3456. Pieces made, we'll put in something invalid, which will be -4, and price per piece, another invalid, -4. And it says pieces must be between 0 and 100. Price per piece must be between 0 and $1. So everything right now is working. All right. The reason we had garbage in there before in these two fields is because I foolishly set the text in here rather than just the tag. So that's it. So we're talking about our base code in here having 400 lines in it. That's a blank, so we can put that. In fact, we don't need this. I'm sorry. Not 400. 380 lines. All right. Plus, we created 4 classes, one of which we took out of the book that had 70 lines in it and no documentation. The only thing I added again in there was in the is present, I added a dot trim. All right. Then employee class that was commented up the wazoo and is about 70 lines. Then we had an hourly employee class, again, commented up the wazoo with about 70 lines. And a piece worker employee, again, commented up the wazoo with around 70 lines. So if you look, there's about 280 lines in here. And then back in here, there was 380 lines. So this is grand total, approximately 660 lines of code. That's a heck of a lot of code. All right. Now, what I want to do is a couple more things here. The next thing I want to do is I want to do a file, save all on this. Now I'm going to close it. All right. And this is the same one I sent to you this morning, except it didn't have the code in it. I just put in the interface. So this is pretest 1416. I'm going to come in here and do a git bash here. Oops, not there. And I'm going to do my git init, which should put a git folder in here. There it is. my get add dot, which should add everything. So if I do a get status now, it'll show me it's got all this stuff here that's ready to add. And my get commit minus M, and I'm going to put in pretest 14 through 16 done Wednesday 7/12/2023. All right, so all that stuff is ready. So now I'm going to jump back and I'm going to quickly go into GitHub. All right, and in here, I'm going to attempt to create a new repository. Hope I don't already have one by that name. And it says pretest 1416 is available. So create the repo, come back to here, grab my remote line, copy that to the clipboard, come back here, paste that in. Oops. Well, now I lost it, so I'll have to copy it back in again. Let me exit this. This is from yesterday. All righty. Okay, so that's now set. So now I should be able to do my git push minus u origin master. It'll spin and think about it. There it goes. Now when I refresh here, there it is. So there is the pretest, and it'll be out, and I'm going to send you an email later with this in here, but it'll be out under the following. It'll be out under the following URL, which will be right there. All right. I think between having that, the two examples that I went over on Monday, those being that letter example and that certified letter example, all right, between having that and that photo thing that we went over on Monday and finished up yesterday, between that and this, I don't think there's any way for me to get you more prepared for the test you will have on Monday. All right, of course, I can always be wrong. I would strongly suggest that before this test on Monday, you go back and at least page through chapter 12, page through chapter 14, and page through chapter 16. There's really nothing in this test, on this test, that I remember at least. I don't think there's any interfaces in here. So really it'll be on 12, 14, and 16. I'd have the book available, and I'd also have these particular files in here available. All right, now that's it for this part. What I also wanted to do today, because I don't want us to fall behind, and that is get rid of this and this. Okay, there. We have now, after Monday, we've done all of section 1, all of section 2, and all of section 3. What I'd like to do between now and noon is to go over chapter 17, how to work with file IO. All right, but I want to put that, this is going to be in a public video, and so will the next one on chapter 17, but I'd like to put it into another video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about a 10-minute break right now. All right, this is a short chapter. So I'm going to come back at 11:15. You might be dropped and have to come back in again because I'm going to create a new taping. All right, so I'm going to stop the taping right now, and then I'm going to start back up at 11:15. All right, so I will see you at 11:15.